Hey guys, MrPokke here. So today we are going to be talking about Iroi's character guide, which has been out for a couple of days in Neverness to Everness. She is pretty much one of, if not our first ever limited buffer as well as support, which makes her utility incredibly valuable no matter what teams you are going to be using her in. So taking a quick overview at what Iroi has to offer, she has excellent sustained healing, powerful attack buffs, providing a defense ignore for the first time in our entire game, as well as a mechanic to revive your allies with regression. With all of these strong team-wide utility, you can pretty much slot Iroi into any team you want, although her current best slot is pretty much going to be Shinku. So for all of our fellow Shinku mains like myself, this is going to be one of the most powerful upgrades you can have. But unfortunately, her personal damage is not going to be too significant, and the sheep damage, which you are going to be transforming your allies to sheep, it is probably not going to be strong enough at this current point unless we have more upgrades in the future, and she requires a better management of her unique resource known as imagination. So for a quick character overview, Iroi is going to be a support-focused Esper whose kit revolves around healing, strengthening allies, and protecting the team through a unique regression and imagination mechanic. She amplifies the team's overall damage instead of acting as a primary DPS, just like a support. So for this core mechanic imagination, you generate imagination through basic attack, redirect skill, support skill, and allies entering regression. More imagination will then strengthen her ultimate, which will then give her additional effects. So from a basic attack, you're pretty much going to be generating imagination while dealing damage. Don't really have to worry about it for too much. For the redirect skill, you'll be granting an attack buff, building on imagination, and you can manually activate regression if you hold it. However, you generally never really want to do this because when your allies turn into sheeps, then Iroi is going to be the only character on field. You will lose quite a significant amount of damage and utility from the rest of your team. So during this regression state, all of the allies' attack will be dealing damage based off Iroi's base attack, and they are pretty much invincible. However, despite your allies being invincible, all allies will also enter this state if they are defeated while Iroi is on the team. So you will want to trigger this state if you make some mistake, but not intentionally go into regression mode every single time. So for the support skill, you're going to be having your healing your allies, building imagination, and activating your signature arc. You do provide damage buff from the heals, and due to the frequency of heals, you can have a very good uptime for her signature. Then lastly, for her ultimate, the 3.8 billion year Mirage, if you do not have enough imagination, you're just going to be having a normal team-wide heal. But if you have enough imagination, as you see from the screen over there, you will have a team-wide heal plus AoE damage and reviving allies in this regression mode. So from this particular regression, just a quick little note, it will transform your defeated allies into the three little sheeps, Morpheus, Aesolos, or Phantastos. The sheeps automatically attack and they inherit Iroi's stat, and they'll eventually be revived by her Empower ultimate later on in the future. But if you're not going to be getting defeated, then you pretty much won't see this play that frequently. Then for the three different sheeps, Morpheus is going to be the Needles with low sleep, Aesolos is going to be the Syringe, and the Phantastos is going to be with the music. All of them function identically, only the animation will be different from them. So like I mentioned, besides from the healing as well as the revival from our allies, the additional passive Sympathetic Nerves will grant our team defense ignore for a short duration whenever she heals an ally. Her signature arc is also going to be covering additional damage buff, but you don't really need this specifically just for her since her damage composition is going to be very small. But regardless, this has a very high uptime for both the defense ignore as well as damage buff, making her pretty much one of the most valuable healer and buffer for our game in Neverness to Everness. Then aside from that, you do have a Blossom enchantment, where after Blossom has been active for 3 seconds, it will create a copy of Vita Bud. And this Vita Bud will not create another copy, but it will still attack dealing 37.5% of the original Vita Bud damage. So while the number of hits will not be as significant, you will still do a higher amount of attacks, which will then allow us to trigger charge much more frequently, which will then give us a lot faster rotation for our entire team. This is also another reason why Shinku is so good with Iroi, due to her getting more energy from more charge triggers. Now moving on to Iroi's builds as well as signature arc, honestly she's very straightforward to understand. Her signature arc itself, which is going to be the Wrong Gate, will provide us with the team-wide damage buff by 15% for 20 seconds. This is going to be whenever the wearer heals, which will also do a little bit more anima damage. The damage is not going to be the more significant portion, but it is going to be with the 15% team-wide damage buff, which is pretty much going to be having an almost 100% uptime. Well, although this is going to be looking really nice, Iroi does have a pretty decent alternatives such as the large Last Rose as well as Youthful Fantasy, because her personal DPS is not going to be significant whatsoever, as majority of her team's damage will still be coming from your main DPS. So if you do want to give her a little bit of a side grade, Lacrimosa's signature arc, the Last Rose, or even the free Youthful Fantasy can provide a very close replacement, although they will be losing their team-wide 15% damage buff. So purely in terms of damage, you can use either of these three options, but if you want the highest amount of utility, then the wrong gate is still going to be a nice option to have. Since NTE's arc system is going to be more manageable based on the tri-key system, which refreshes every single month, you could consider picking this up, but unfortunately, if you have to go all the way for hard PD, I would personally reserve these signature arcs just for the main DPS because they tend to have a higher level of damage increase. Then in regards to the build, it's actually super straightforward, and that's going to be the 4-piece Speedy Hedgehog. This is going to be a universal buffer cartridge set in Iroi's best option, which if you are going to be combining with a skill, this will have a pretty much one of the highest amount of utility, buffing us to 100% efficiency. The charge efficiency is also going to be really nice, just to cast the ultimate a little bit more frequently with the additional attack buff. If you do not want to use this Speedy Hedgehog, you can consider Fireflies of the Forest just for personal damage, although I would not recommend this if you're just going to be going for a general support build. Then with regards to the mainstay, it's always going to be Psycho Intensity, followed by Anima Damage, Crit Damage, Crit Rate, and Attack, and the subset is going to be once again Psycho Intensity, Crit Damage, Crit Rate, Damage, and Attack. Because for Iroi herself, you don't really care about any of her personal damage at all, while Psycho Intensity can still increase the overall damage, especially for that little bit of Vita butt generation. Then for our skill priority, is going to be Passive 1 into Passive 2, followed by Skill, Ultimate Support Skill, and lastly Basic. Now, moving on into Iroi's Awakenings, which are going to be all of her dupes, you are going to be taking A5 as the highest priority, followed by A2 into A1, and then for A4, 3, and 6, it's going to be mainly just for the whales, or if you want to be playing her as a DPS. A5 is going to be her best awakening by far, as it will give her passive an additional effect where she'll increase her allies' attack by 15% of her base attack by 20 seconds. As such, on top of the 5% defense ignore, this additional 15% attack buff will be giving us the highest level of utility. Then aside from A5, A2 will give you a little bit more attack and healing buff, while A1 will improve your overall rotation. So for the A2, this additional sheep will be summoned at random, which will also heal the ally, and this additional healing will also give her more opportunities to activate her passive, which is going to be from the A5, giving us the attack as well as defense ignore buff, or if you're going to be having her signature arc for the damage buff. A1 is going to allow Iroi to build Imagination off you, increasing this game by 30%, and this is pretty much what powers Iroi's ultimate, helping you access the strongest version much faster, which will also revive your team a lot faster if you're going to be dying very frequently. Then from A4 all the way through A6, it kind of depends on your personal preference. A4 is going to increase the attack ratio for your lamps in the regression state, which is pretty much only going to be meant if you're going to be playing Iroi as a main DPS. However, for most players, you're still better off using Iroi as a support build, generally speaking. And then for A3 is going to be to increase the healing effect, which is pretty much it. And then lastly, A6, it will increase a very good amount of buffs for 100% HP, 50 cycle energy, and 50 ultimate energy. However, one ally must be revived for your ultimate, and ideally, you shouldn't really get your allies getting killed in the NTE's endgame content in the first place, which is why A6 is a very niche situation. So generally, TLDR going for A5 into either A2 or A1, lastly going for A4, A3, as well as A6. Now, on to the last segment, which is going to be her gameplay rotation as well as some potential team comps. You are going to be using her very infrequently, so using a redirect skill whenever possible to build your imagination to maintain your heals as well as buffs, and using the Empower Ultimate whenever available. If your allies do fall during this stage, you can actually revive them in the regression state when necessary. So overall, Iroi is a very simple to use character. Then regarding Iroi's team comps, is extremely flexible, so we have seen her with, for example, the classic Shinku, or with a Nanali Bloom team. You can also use her with Hotori, you can use her with Cheese, Chaos, or even Baizang, or if you really want to go for it, then a DPS Iroi team if you want. Personally speaking, I think these two are going to be the more popular option, and that's going to be the Shinku main DPS using the charge mechanic as well as the Nanali Blossom team. The charge mechanic works very well with Iroi, especially with the duplicated Vita butt, which will then trigger your charge much more frequently. As such, units that can make use of charge, especially with units like Shinku as well as even Chaos, which wants to cast the ultimate as frequently as possible, can be the biggest benefactor of this particular build. Other units can also include units like Cheese as well as Nanali. Then you are going to be using Iroi as the anima support, followed by Hardjaw to trigger your Remora, and lastly MC, which is going to give us the additional cycle reset. If you do want to play a DPS with a Blossom team, you could consider running Iroi, Nanali, Jiuyuan, as well as MC or Hotori for the quote-unquote Vita Bot spam team, because for this particular team with the added benefit of Jiuyuan, increasing the number of Vita bots, you can do an absolutely significant amount of damage with Nunnally as your main DPS, while you're going to be using either Zero Hotori to create the highest possible amount of damage with Vita bots. I would say the current team of Nunnally, Jiuyuan, MC, as well as Hotori has still been performing very well, so you can use them in your discretion. Overall, I would say Iroi's placement in the current team building composition for two different teams is going to be seeing which team really requires Iroi a little bit more. So for example, right now, I would say Nannally's team is going to be more complete in Blossom, where Shinku's team will see a huge damage increase with Iroi, especially with how quickly she can activate charge, which is a utility that cannot be provided by other supports. With that, we pretty much come to the end of Iroi's quick little guide over here. Final verdict, she is going to be one of the strongest support characters we have as of the current moment of version 1.2, focused on healing, buff uptime, imagination generation, and the empower ultimate usage rather than building Iroi as a main DPS. Her usage as a support is absolutely second to none, and if you really like playing with Shinku like myself, then this is going to be an extremely valuable pickup. Let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments down below. Word of the day is going to be Sheep. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, use code POKE, all the best for God to boost. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.